My name is Wolf, Papa Yankee 2, Bravo, November, Delta. I'm working with mcHF almost 3 years. The first one I built for my own, a genuine one, from Mike 0, November Kilo Alpha. It was a kit and it's working until today without any problem. After that I built for some friends more mcHFs, almost 20, and so I'm very familiar with this radio, and all of them worked perfect, are working perfect until today. Recently, due to the fact that I'm working a lot with this mcHF, I received a call from a local ham operator that purchased a clone and had some problems soon after his purchase. Almost 2 months later, he found his radio defect, unoperational, out of nothing. And I have also another case recently, but I refused any repair because I'm not very familiar with this radio operator, and this one here I have had a good contact and said okay, I accepted it as exception to take a look, and I thought okay, it's only maybe only the processor dead, maybe something that, or firmware, lost firmware, need to reprogram the firmware, something like that. And it turned out to be a really different case. In the past I just have one time repaired a radio like this, and I was very upset about the build quality, the parts that they used in these clones, and the radio really never performed very well, but I could make it working, and it worked more or less, but far away from a genuine one. Yes, in reception it was not really good, and the transmission was only a problem to get power out of it, especially in the upper bands. But okay, the guy was happy about that the radio was working again, and in this case I accepted once again, but this will be the last time for sure, to take a look on this clone. What you see here is a UI board, and you can just see that this board is not really have really good build quality. You see here residues from the soldering, bad soldering of the display, jumpers here all around. This codec was just replaced one time. You can see it because it's not very well aligned, and the board is dead for sure. Yes. So after some investigations about that processor, to find out why this processor died, and I've just another case as well from another radio operator. He asked me as well, please take a look on my radio, and I refused. I don't have time for this, and so I thought it would be a good point to investigate a little bit more, because you have so many of these radios with that processor. Yes, I never had a single case of a dead processor in a genuine mcHF. Almost nothing. I've only had one time a dead display, and it was easy to fix. Only to replace the display, and the board was running again, but that processor I never had. Yes. So the first thing that I did to investigate is what could damage the processor, and I found it very fast. What caused here the damage of the processor? Here you have a 5-volt USB connector. It's a DFU USB, and on the DFU USB you have also 5 volt coming from the CPU, from the computer. And the first thing that caught my attention was that this rail, this 5-volt rail, was going into the board, what should not happen. Yes, the 5 volts of this DFU USB never should go to the board for good reasons. In the original one you have a jumper, but you never install this jumper. Yes, so the first thing, I took a look where this 5 volt from the USB connector are going to. And for my surprise, I found it here going directly to the processor. Yes, and these 5 volts are going directly to the processor, to the pin 5 boot, to the pin, you can say it here, it's pin 94, boot 0, VPP. And this just should not happen. Yes, here you should have, for the boot 0, you should have happen, you should encounter 3.3 volts. For the people who are not so familiar with this kind of electronics, here you have the processor is powered with 3.3 volts. The same happens here with the EEPROM. You have also the codec here, should also be powered with 3.3 volts. And the 3.3 volts are coming here from this regulator. This regulator is U6. And it makes the 5 volts coming here from the rail, from the supply rail, 5 volts going into the regulator, and then is coming out here 3.3 volts. And so what we saw here, this 5 volts never should going here to the board. This called really my attention. When I put here for testing purposes, yes, this boot 0 jumper P6 on the board, here you should have 3.3 volts from the regulator. Yes, and then when you put here this jumper on it, you find 5 volts from the USB directly going to the outside of the regulator. This means that in the moment when you put in here the jumper, you will have all over the board 5 volts that would kill everything. So processor, the codec, EEPROM, and the display probably as well. And so it's clear when you want to program here with this board the microprocessor, and this is the reason because I don't replace it first as the original processor. I want to know at first what could have damaged here the processor. When you put a new processor here inside and you want to reprogram it, you will destroy your processor once again. And so this is the first investigation, was to find out why the processor died, and I found the reason. And it comes even worse when you put in the jumper. Here you have only 5 volts from the USB on one pin, but when you put in here the jumper, the P6 jumper, then you have 5 volts all over the board. Yes, and then everything dies here on the board. Okay. But take a look here in practice that this really happens. So we connect here the measurement lead here to ground to measure really the voltage. So we have here the board. The board is not powered. You can see it. Not powered. Then you can make it here. Then we power the board on with 5 volts. We have here a power consumption of about 100 milliamperes. And now we take some measurements here. First of all, we see here 5 volts are coming into the board, to the regulator. And what we see here, we have here 3.3 volts on the output of the regulator. So far so nice. If the processor would be okay, display would be okay, the codec okay, the board would work normally. Yes. But now we have here this question here: what's happened with the processor when we put here when we plug here the USB in? And I will do it now. We measure here on R40, who is going directly to the processor. Yes. So what we should here see is really nothing. That's right. And we plug in here the USB. What we see here, 5.2 volts. This means when you connect the board with USB for CAD operation, audio, IQ, something like that, you will damage the processor. 5 volts are going directly to the processor. What should not happen, this 5 volt rail never ever should go to any place here on the board, but it's going here, you can see it, directly to the boot 0 pin P94. So this probably will damage here the processor. The moment when you connect it here to a USB, the processor will be encounter some damages for sure. Maybe not in the first moment, but over the time the processor will die. But the things comes even worse. Normally when you want to bring up such a board alive again, you replace the processor, and you start to program it again. So you need here USB connection. You connect it to USB, and you put in here this little jumper on P6. Yes, and then you start programming it with diffuse tool. Yeah, with the STM diffuse tool. And what we see here, we have here on the outside of the regulator 3.3 volts. We can see it. Input is 5 volt. Output is 3.3 volt. How it should be. Yes. And now comes the moment of truth. When you put here this jumper in, look what's happened here. The whole board will be powered with 5 volts. This will kill everything, or kill just everything. Display, codec, everything. But where this is coming from? From China. When you look on the board here, this seems to be a pre-version board of a clone. And it seems to me, especially when you take a look here on the RF board, what we will take as well a look on the RF board, then you will see that the guy who assembled this radio maybe used some pre-version parts, some scrap parts, to build out a radio of it, and then sell it on eBay or sell it on AliExpress. That is what's happened here. Yes. So where it's coming from, it's a layout error, obviously. This way, I don't know how they programmed the processor. Probably they did it here with another interface, with this P8 interface, and you have direct access here, ESP access to the processor, and you can program it. Yes, but this way, when you try to repair it, the first thing that you have to do is to cut the 5 volt line, route it to 3.3 volts, how it should be, replace the processor, then program it, could be via USB, you fix the problem, and maybe the board fire ups, but you will see after this maybe will be EEPROM dead, the codec will be dead, display maybe as well, so it will come to a big mess to repair it. And this is what you get when you buy a clone. Maybe you can say, this was a case of the buyer had no luck to buy, yes. But no, I have several other requests for repairs of this kind of defect, and I refuse all of them except this guy is a friend of mine, and I said, okay, I'll take a look on it. But nevertheless, let's take another look more in detail about this case here. You find here all soldering, really dirty soldering here. When you take a deeper look here with a amplifying lens, you can see how bad it was made here all over. Yes, this guy just was replaced one time. The guy who replaced it, maybe for good reason, because it was a scrap part. I believe it was simply a scrap part. Clever guy, clever Chinese, picked up this scrap boards to build the radios out of it. Here, the jumper here, and so on. When you want to replace here the display, it's heavy work to replace it without destroying the board, because it's soldered all over. In the genuine one, it's made very different. If you want to replace the display, it's quite easy. Especially the way I put the display in, and it's a task maybe of 15 or 30 minutes to replace the display, and in this case it would be a question of hours to put every pin, single pin out one by one, to avoid any damage on the PCB. Yes, we talk about a version here, UE PCB version 0.8. This is a version, the Chinese version. And when we took here another look here, you can see here UHSDR QRP transceiver UE board revision 0.8, and after that modify. So this is some advice, maybe that something must be modified here. Oh no, this board must be patched in many points here. You must here cut off the 5 volt line, you must reroute the programming line here to 3.3 volts, and so on. And here you can see another patches, so this board is here almost a mess. Yes, but we now take a look here on the RF board. Yes, this comes also very ugly here. First of all, there is built in a battery here. You can see it here. This installation is made out of very low quality cable. When I put it apart, this radio, you believe it or not, this wiring came apart for alone. I did not need to cut anything. The wiring comes really apart. Here you can see it. It came apart, and also here on this point here, it was here soldered, this wire here, and you need to use a switch between internal battery and external power supply. Very bad design, because you could make it that you don't need this switch. If you plug in an external power supply, the own radio by own logic would use the external supply, and if it's not plugged in, it would use the internal supply, and also the charging would be made automatically. But in this way, they used here a switch. It's the Chinese way, okay. Just from this point, it was sad to see. Yes. Now we take here a look. You can see several things who had been made different than the original one, but the most important thing here is when you take here a look on the local oscillator. Here, this is a local oscillator in this Chinese clone. Nicely on the layout, you have also a place to put in the original SE570 oscillator, synthesizer. Yes, it's a synthesizer circuit who makes who supplies the local oscillator. And so this chip is quite expensive. As a SE570 is let's take a look what is. It's quite expensive, this local oscillator. Yeah, and to make the radio cheaper, they put here in a very inexpensive local oscillator chip that you can also find here in this AliExpress oscillator synthesizer boards. They use here an SE5351. Yes, you can use it, but it comes not even close to the original 570 oscillator. Stability, phase noise, all the things are not even coming close to the original one, and so you suffer many spurios, and for the phase shifting that you have, you find spurios in the demodulation and so on. It's not the original SE570 has some reasons to put in. Yes, and you have here something different. Okay, many different components, I guess. Here and here, these are analog switches. Because it's easier to purchase, cheaper to purchase. Okay, maybe they modified it. And now we come here to the PA part, to the power amplifier. Of course, they use here as well RD15 HVP1, and these are very cheap power supply switching transistors, not capable to bring up a good HF signal. Yes, but they are cheap. They are used in power supply units and so on. Very cheap, and they put it in because the original one, who are really RF transistors, are quite expensive. Yes, but what is the consequence? You don't have power on the upper bands. Maybe excessive heating. Yes, but anyway, you will have a bad output signal. Very many distortions. Yes, and yes, you come on here. You have here some Chinese ferrite material for part of the transformer, for the power transformer. Don't know what they used here for PR transformer here is looking like a really original medium core, but this one is not really a medium core for sure, and this also are not a medium cores. Yes, you see here on the LPF these capacitors, some class B or class C capacitors. They are not multi-layer class A capacitors. What this means, you have also here losses inside of the LPF, low pass filter, and yeah, this is what you get. And now we take a look here on the other side. You can see here is a jumper, probably because they have a layout error. They forgot to pass the ground layer to the other side, or it was insufficient. The ground layer that they put here in, routing error probably. Then you find here a transformer, and here below they soldered some other components. When you take a look here on microscope what they put in, you are very surprised. They put in some capacitors in series, in parallel, to let something working here. Yes, to make it working here. Here on the TX, on the antenna switch here, this is here the antenna switch section. You find normally here, you find here the pin diodes. You make the switching, and they replaced the switching with pin diodes with a relay. Okay, you can make it this way. Have some advantages or disadvantages. Nevertheless, this is not original design, and how they made it is also this relay switch. Also, I put in my own radio also a relay switch, yes. But in the way you put it in, you can also very easy to burn up your entry stage of the receiver, yes. And the way they did it here, I'm not sure how they did it. Probably also the ugly way. Maybe your transceiver will die after some transmission when the relay is not switching correctly. Yes, and then you have a completely burned up receiver stage. Yes, so this is what I found here. It's really ugly build. When you take a look here, UHSDR RF board revision 0.6.4 December 21. It was purchased recently. So recent is this board is not so recent. Yes, it's almost 2 years old. And so this is a reason because I say this unit was assembled out of some crap parts, and to make money out of it. Yes, there was a Chinese guy, found some crap boards, bought them cheap, and built some radios out of it and sold them. I have more reports about dead processors from these clones. It's not the only one that I have here who asked me to repair some piece of shit, I have to say, this way. And now I decided for my own peace, for my own wellness, that I never will take apart such of these Chinese radios. What the owner has here is almost a complete loss. If you not would be able to repair it by your own, because when I put my hours here into this nightmare to bring it up, it would probably be more expensive than to buy original one. Yes. So the owner, I recommended to the owner to make a claim on AliExpress, where I have every time I had success, but he is not sure to have some success. And yes, for me it's to put it in a box, send it back to the owner, and the owner learned the hard way that you should not buy this scrap. Yes. Okay, there are people say, no, this pre-tested, and Facebook group says, expert says, no, I have pre-tested versions, it's tested in 150 steps and so on. Put this thing apart and take a look on it, what's inside. Yes. And measure the performance of these radios. But don't claim to be expert, like Schumacher, to say these are perfect radios. I think it's a complete mess to buy such a thing. You can buy a Saigo radio, for example. It's also cheap. You have here this X6100. It seems to be a good radio. It's also a Chinese build, but a lot of much less problems with this radio. The firmware has some bugs and they correct it, but I have very little complaints about radios on Saigo. You pay almost the same, have really a radio. And why to buy such a crap? It doesn't worth the money. The Chinese never improved. I can see it here on this board. And the other radio that I repaired was not in a shape so much better. It was for sure a honest build, because this board that I had not this devastating layout error who kills the whole UI board. But it was also, finally it was scrap. It never performed, not closely to original mcHF. So from my experience, from more than 20 genuine builds, using the radio 3 years now, other 20 users are using this radio, also genuine builds with very good success, very good performance, and so many people here with its nightmare, this really crappy hardware copied from the Chinese. So this is my recommendation, not to buy this crap, and buy a radio that really worth the money. This was Papa Yankee 2 Bravo November Delta and 73.